Hi, I'm Steve James, and this weekend on 30 Minutes, we go back to December 1993 with our former Thunderbolt news director, the late Tracy Sharp, and a discussion she had with June Moll and Peg Renone about grief during the holidays. We hope you enjoy this weekend's 30 Minutes.
For some people, the holidays are not filled with the joy and excited anticipation one might expect. Instead, there's a sense of overwhelming despair attached to Christmas and New Year's Day's events. Today, our guests are June Moll, licensed clinical social worker in outpatient services at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Union City, and Peg Renone, a grief recovery specialist and founder of Halos, a support group for bereaved parents. Today on 30 Minutes, our discussion will be on grief during the holidays. Is this common during the holiday period?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yes, we expect it always. Our business changes from dealing with daily issues to dealing with sadness, grief over a lot of issues.
And this is something, I'm sure that when people are talking to both of you, is there guilt that goes along with it? And why am I feeling this way? I've got the blues and everybody is so happy and everybody, you see what's on TV and that sort of thing. How do you deal with those kinds of emotions?
First of all, there's usually a whole range of emotions, a whole panorama from grief to confusion to guilt, a feeling that, I'm different from everybody else and they're happy and I'm not, and why am I not happy? Also a sense of obligation that I should be feeling like everybody else wants me to feel. And depending on which stage of the grief they're in, the treatment is somewhat different.
And we were saying before that we started taping the show that grief isn't necessarily, it's not necessarily attributed to a death, even though we will get into that. It's a loss.
Any kind of loss, yes.
Right. And we'll go to Peg Renone now, who is a founder of Halos. Now, you directly work with parents who have lost children, and there goes a whole line of things that goes along with that, of dealing with the emotion.
Definitely. Any type of death, whether it be a parent or a spouse or even a close friend, is very, very, very traumatic, and there are a lot of emotions tied with that. But when a child dies, the emotions can be compounded at least 1,000-fold. And possibly, especially the first couple of holidays, the first couple of years that the child has been dead, the parents experience a wide range of emotions. And if there is a home where there are surviving children, the surviving children feel guilty and a lot of times anger, because not only have they lost their brother or sister, but they've also lost the love and attention that they usually got from their parents, because their parents are grieving on their own and don't know how to cope with other children that are in the home.
As we're dealing with this topic, and this topic sometimes is very difficult because it's hard for some people to even recognize that this may be what they're going through. They just feel a sense of unease. If a child dies or if somebody dies, there is something to attribute the feelings to, but sometimes there's not. It's just that sinking despair that sometimes sets in.
I think people usually think about grieving when it occurs closely to some event. For instance, a divorce, a separation, a death, a loss of a house through fire, and all one's, for instance, family photographs. But grief can extend over, as Peg says, over a year or 2 years. And so anything that's happened within the past year, where this is the first Christmas, the first New Year's, there is usually some reaction. That may be anger rather than sadness. A person may be feeling irritable and what I call the bah humbug attitude, where they just don't want to be around people, they don't want to decorate, they don't want to go to family events because of the sadness and the expectations of having to cook and to do things. So it may come out in a number of different ways other than just sadness.
With the people that you work with in outpatient services, what are some of the things that you tell them to deal with their grief when they're going through it?
Well, first of all, just recognizing what it is. I think many of us feel there's something wrong with us. We don't know what it is, and we feel like we're the only ones who've ever had it. once we can put a name on something, it makes it a little easier to deal with, and there's not the fear of the unknown. If you label yourself as just unhappy or hard to get along with, or my wife or husband tells me that I should be happy, I should be doing other things, then I think there's a sense of something is wrong, that I'm not normal, I'm not like other people. Other people do grieve, and they do have sadness, and they do have frustration and anger. And once we can recognize that that truly exists and it is a normal process of life, then we feel ready to do something about it. I think a lot of grief that deals with anger, and I know Peg deals with a lot of this, most people do not realize that there are a lot of emotions that we can see almost in progression during the grief process. And not all of these are sadness and despair. Not all of these are crying. They may come out in a number of different ways. For instance, with children, there's a lot of acting out, misbehavior, poor school grades, things that normally we would not label as grief.
And we'll go back to Peg now. How do you counsel with the people that you're working with right now?
I think the main thing for them to realize is that they're the ones that are in control this year, or any year subsequent from now. That even though people say you should be over this and you should be able to deal with the holidays, they are in control. If they don't feel like putting up a Christmas tree this year because it's too painful, or they don't feel like having a house full of family to celebrate Christmas dinner, that's okay. And I think they have to realize that. And I think the other thing that's important to stress is that they need to take care of themselves. Grief is very, very draining, not only emotionally, but physically as well. And I think they need to take time out each day for themselves, whether it be a walk or listening to quiet music, that they don't have to be what everybody else wants them to be. They have to grieve their own personal way.
I think it's just best to embrace the grief then.
Yeah, I think she made a very good point. People will tell you how you should feel. A common thing I hear is you should be over this by now, or if you will celebrate, or if you'll get involved in something, this feeling will go away. And that's not necessarily true. So, it is okay to grieve. It is okay to share this grief with your family and to do it your way. And I think that's a very important point, Peg.
And I think, too, we talk about grief here, but I think we have to realize that the holiday season, a lot of people become very depressed because there's so much stress around the holiday season. If you have a full-time job and a family and outside interests, now couple that with writing Christmas cards, entertaining more, putting up the Christmas tree, and you've got all that emotional stress. And now we include grief onto that. It becomes so overwhelming that, it's very easy to understand why people they would rather wake up tomorrow morning and have it January 2nd than have to deal with the holidays.
It's real. There's a saying that I've heard before of any time, don't compare your insides with somebody else's outsides. And that goes from whether you've had something just tragically dramatic, like the loss of a child, to the point of just being stressed, is just kind of staying in that mold of let them do what they want to do, but you stay where you need to be.
If you can get in touch with your own feelings and at least identify, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling angry, whatever that feeling is, it's easier then to know what to do about it. For instance, if the feeling is tired, the way to take care of yourself is to give yourself some extra rest and regular meals. And this is so basic, we don't tell people that a lot, but regular sleep, regular meals, regular routine will help a lot in stressful or grief times.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good point when you mention the things that they really need to do. I think this is a good point, or a good time to bring up the point that drugs and alcohol is not going to solve the problem. I know a lot of time people innocently begin a routine of taking drugs or drinking more alcohol, hoping that this will help numb their feelings of pain or anger or guilt. But the bottom line is that a lot of times this becomes an addiction, and not only that, it's really not going to solve the problem at hand. Working through the grief and allowing yourself months or even years to recover or adjust to a life without a special loved one or recovering from other losses that have occurred in your life. You know, that I think that drugs and alcohol, they become a prominent thing in your life, and I become concerned because a lot of times it does turn into an addiction.
I also have some concern over spending. I think a lot of times when we are under stress or when we are at the holidays, we feel that if we spend, then we'll feel better. That may or may not solve problems. It may create other problems such as additional bills. So celebration will not necessarily make you feel better. If you don't feel like celebrating, that's okay too.
So you don't, a lot of the time I know that some people try to kind of go against where they're at.
Right.
And these are some things that you may try to go, well, I'll just go to all of these parties this week and that'll fix it. But there's really no fixing it. You've kind of got to go through the process.
You have to listen to yourself. And as I told you earlier today, grief is a process. It's not an event. It's not something that just happens and you get over it. You work a little bit at it over time. The intensity may change from day to day, but it takes a year or maybe two to complete the whole process.
If one of our listeners is maybe recognize that there's a problem here and I want to search out a solution, what are some things, who can they call? Can they call somebody to say, okay, I don't know what to do here, or what's another step? Do they need to talk about what they're going through? What do they need to do?
You want to respond first, Peg, and then I'll...
Okay, well, I think one of the things that they can do, if they're uncomfortable calling myself or June, find a really, truly good friend that you can really dump on, and you can cry, and you can yell, and you can scream, and you can talk about your problem, and the friend's not going to say, but you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. The friend is just going to hug you and be there for you. To me, that's the most important thing that you can do. If you feel that you don't have anybody, then by all means, call Baptist Hospital, talk to June or one of the other counselors, call myself, find somebody. Don't let it fester, and then it gets to the point that it becomes so insurmountable you just really give up.
I agree. Sharing emotions sometimes lightens the load for all of us. There's a sense that somebody cares about us, that somebody's willing to listen without being judgmental about what's going on. And if you do have family who are able to share that grief with you, particularly if you're going through something together as a family, then it's very comforting to know that they're there with you, and they maybe they're strong when you're crying, and maybe you're strong when they're crying. So I think sharing is a real secret. If you have nobody else, of course, we're always glad to listen.
If there's a mother and a father and they have suffered a loss back, is it sometimes hard, especially during the holiday period, for them to turn to each other? Is that a...
Definitely. People often think that when a child dies in a home, that the mother and father become even closer. That's usually very untrue. They become further apart. Men and women, it has been proven, grieve differently. And in a home where a child has died, the father grieves his way, the mother grieves her way, and they become further apart. And not only do they have the death of the child, they may have surviving siblings that are doing their own grieving. The mother and father, rather than pulling together and working as a family, fall apart. And then there's even more problems.
When this situation goes on, and I'm just asking mainly because I don't know, do you think that you said something about that men and women grieve differently, and I'd like for you to elaborate on that.
Most men have been taught that they aren't allowed to cry or have emotions, that they have to be big boys, and they have to be men, that big boys don't cry. So men will have a tendency to turn all their anger and their guilt and all their emotions inwardly. They aren't willing to share with other people. They go off by themselves. They pour themselves into work more. They'd rather not come home at night because they see that their wife maybe is getting over her grief a little sooner than they are. Women, on the other hand, we are very willing to share. We want to get out there and we want to find somebody else and talk about our child that has died. And we want to turn to our husband, who is the normal person to turn to, but they don't want to share with us. So it's a real struggle inside a family where a child has died.
And it's just hard to find that line.
It really is. It really is.
we were discussing that grief doesn't necessarily have to be just a death. I know that if you talk to a lot of recovering people, they grieve not having that, having a mood-altering substance in their system during a holiday period. It's very real.
I think most of us are aware that temptation to use alcohol or drugs during the holidays increases, but we don't realize that we're giving up something. So since grief is about loss, we've given up something which, at least for a time, made our lives pleasurable, or we thought it did. So going through the first set of holidays without the alcohol or drugs is a particularly difficult time, I think. And I'd also like to comment on some other things that go on in families. If there's been a divorce, if there is a custody battle and the family is struggling with a different way of observing the holidays, a visitation where each parent maybe feels that they're not getting their part of the holidays with the children, there are all kinds of grief issues around this. The children may be grieving over divorce. They may be grieving over the fact that they have moved and the relatives or the friends that they usually celebrated with are no longer there, and they're very lonely. So there are a lot of issues that come up at this particular time.
And what do you tell the people that you're doing counsel with of how to deal with those situations? I'm sure that children, you said earlier, act out. Families, I'm sure adults act out occasionally too.
I think we want to label that as awful when people don't behave like we want them to, and we're not all perfect ladies and gentlemen, and certainly we want our children to behave. But I think a certain amount of disruptive behavior is to be expected, that if you see a child who is upset, who is maybe a little more rambunctious or irritable than usual, know that is okay, that they may need a little more activity, they may need a little more talk time. The hugs are wonderful for even adults as well as the children. So a little extra time and attention, and it doesn't necessarily have to be talking about the stressful event or the grief. Just knowing that somebody's there for them and somebody cares is very, very helpful.
Just the issue of being loved then. I
right,
know that
yeah, however you can demonstrate that.
That's
yes.
right, yeah.
How do you cope with these kinds of emotions when they happen in the holiday season?
I think the best thing is what we've been talking about. You just roll with the flow. Don't look at the holiday as just this overwhelming thing. I think you need to take each day as it comes. And for some people, they just need to take each minute as it comes. It's not how am I going to get through this whole month. It's how am I going to get through the next 15 or 20 minutes today.
I agree. I have a rather corny expression I use with people that I see in therapy, and that is bumbling through. Most of us expect ourselves to get through graciously and do this season well, and really all we have to do is to survive, and hopefully we'll enjoy a little bit of it if we do that. Enjoying the holidays is not necessarily a rule. If you are feeling miserable, it's okay to go off by yourself and listen to music, or to putter in your workshop, or to cook in the kitchen, or to do whatever calms the feeling of distress inside of you.
Right. And I think for some people, it's okay to even cancel the holiday. If you don't want to celebrate Christmas this year, that's okay too. But I think you need to give yourself permission too, that if you do have a happy moment, if you do catch yourself chuckling or having a smile on your face, that's okay too. And so often that happens, and people start feeling guilty right away that, my loved ones died, or we've had a divorce in the family or whatever. I shouldn't be happy about this. And I think that's wrong. I think it's okay if you smile or even chuckle a little bit. You need to give yourself permission to do that.
Some people find comfort in religious activities, some don't. Some find comfort in reading, sometimes. Some people find comfort in being with friends. Some prefer to do this by themselves. All of those approaches are okay as long as you know that that's what's helping you. Any activity that you normally do, sports, I think regular rest, regular meals, not necessarily Christmas fare, some exercise, some time alone, some time with people, whether you're enjoying it or not, helps you get through.
There's just not a handbook that comes with grieving, especially during the holidays.
Yeah.
So have to just kind of find what works for you.
That's right.
Right, because your feelings are changing, and that's part of the grieving, is that you don't stay with any one feeling all the time. And as those feelings change, you may want to try some things. If one thing's not working, then you try something else to see if that gives you any relief inside.
Right. And I think we have to go back to the same thing, that you are the one that's in control. Don't be so intimidated when people say, well, it's been 6 months. You should be over this by now. No, you shouldn't be over it by now if this is the first holiday. And if you really are still grieving an awful lot, you're not going to be over it. So you need to stay in control of how things are going to happen.
And you discussed about giving yourself permission. When either one of you, and anybody can answer this, are talking to the people that you work with about giving themselves permission, how do you tell them to do that?
That's exactly what I tell them, is give yourself permission. At the beginning of Christmas, of the Christmas day, give yourself permission to have a happy moment, if that's going to happen. Give yourself permission to cry, if that's going to happen. And that's exactly what I tell them. You are in control. Give yourself permission to have the kind of day that you want to have.
I may, particularly since I deal with adolescents and children and families of all ages, I may use the word, it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to do this differently. Most of us grow up with little rules in our heads about how Christmas or any other holiday ought to be observed, and that you can only do this if you have everybody in the family there, and you have turkey and ham and, a certain way to observe the holidays. I think we have to give ourselves permission to suspend those rules and to look at this as this is a time where I need to figure out what's best for me, and not necessarily to listen to all those little rules. Now, I'm not talking about breaking the law. I'm simply saying that it's okay not to go to Aunt Nell's house if you don't want to.
When you're at family events and you've made that decision to go, and you are suffering from the blues a little bit, and you are grieving and dealing with the emotions, and it hits real hard in a group of people, how do you need to deal with that?
Just do it. Just do whatever happens. If you have one of those emotional breakdowns where you're crying, and I don't mean just the tear down the cheek, I mean sobbing, it's okay to sob. You need to do that. This is the way you're coping with your grief. I know it makes other people very uncomfortable, but this is what is helping you. And I say, like June does, it's okay.
And if you want to leave, that's okay, too. I very often advise people to make their plans so that, go in your car. So if you want to go home, or you want to go for a drive,
Right.
or you want to interrupt the activity you're involved in, that you can do that. Most of us expect to go for long periods of time, the whole day, maybe even overnight. But that's not necessary that you do that. You can change those plans. You can do whatever is making you more comfortable. If going back home feels better, then do it.
Be flexible. Be real flexible.
Especially when you're in an odd space or a difficult space during the holidays. Just make it flexible and easier on yourself.
Right.
If you're expected to do a lot of activities, you may opt out. You may tell family, friends, whatever, I'm not doing as much this year, and that's okay too. Mm-hmm. However, if a lot of activity helps you, then you may want to volunteer for some activities.
If somebody does say, get over it, come on, please, what do you tell the people you work with? How do they need to respond with that? Is it go with it again, or just ignore when people aren't being very helpful?
Well, it's okay to ignore if you want to. Here again, it's a matter of choice. You choose what you want to do about it and what feels most comfortable to you. It's also okay to say to people, I have a right to my own thoughts and feelings. They're mine. I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable.
That's right. I would say the same thing, exactly. Mm-hmm. But we do have a tendency, when we're bothering someone else, we do try to straighten up so that we don't offend them or make them feel bad. But a lot of people, like June said, a lot of people either opt to do that, or sometimes they'll say, I'm having a bad day, and I'm sorry if I'm making you uncomfortable, but this is how I'm making it through the day. Mm-hmm.
But you don't need to deny yourself any emotions, especially if they're real strong. Be they, in the grieving, very intense emotion that sometimes hits, and sobbing that you said a while ago. Mm-hmm.
I can give you a personal example. I had told Peg earlier that my mother died this year. Early on, I think it was the first day of the month, where I work, they were playing Christmas carols over the intercom system, and it had been a particularly stressful, long day for me, one of those 12-hour days. And so I told people that I'm having a bah humbug day. I'm not feeling very happy, so if you're getting some sort of feeling from me that you don't understand, it's because I'm not finished with my grieving, and if I'm making you uncomfortable, tell me, I'll leave. But I think we all have those times where something unexpected occurs, maybe a very, very small thing. Most of us hear Christmas carols, and that's not out of line, but it happened to hit me wrong that day, and I allowed myself to go back in my office and be morbid for a little while and then come back out and do what I had to do. But it's okay to do that, I think.
I think it's real important to do that. And a lot of times you find that if you're real honest with people and say, I'm having a bah humbug day, more often than not, someone else may be having a bah humbug day, and they are almost appreciative of the fact that you've acknowledged it, that now that maybe they can understand better why they're feeling the way they're feeling.
We've got just about 4 more minutes of this program, which I think is very important because you don't necessarily have to just jump on the Christmas bandwagon and feel a certain way. And sometimes it is difficult, and then sometimes there are the moments, it's like you said, I think it's very important, June, is one moment you may feel really all right, and then the next minute you may feel miserable. And it's not there's no handbook that goes with this. You just have to ride with it.
I think parents that have children sometimes have a hard time coping with their own feelings and helping their children cope with their feelings. But if you go ahead and cry, if you say, I'm having a hard day, you're actually teaching your child how to deal with stress and how to deal with grief while you're actually grieving yourself. So it's okay to do that,
They're going to watch what you're doing,
right,
and they're going,
learn.
This is the way you do it.
Yeah, this is the way to try.
Is there anything else that either one of you would like to add before we have to close out the show on maybe some other coping mechanisms or just some things to look for?
I would like to stress that people have the right to ask for help or comfort or understanding during this period of time. Most of us feel that other people should recognize that we need that and give it to us automatically. If they don't, however, it's okay to let people know that you need this. It's not begging to say, I need a little extra time and attention. I need you to let me off the hook and not do all the cooking this year. Or I need you to understand that I'm not putting up all the Christmas decorations. So sometimes I think we're very shy about letting people know what we need.
And I'd like to add to that especially when someone has died, and this may be a very, very painful Christmas, I think it's important that we remember the person who has died. Talk about the person. Share memories, maybe make a memory album with pictures or stories. Light a candle in the home and make it aware to everyone that the candle is in memory of the person who has died. Maybe they'd like to donate flowers to their church in memory of the person who has died. It's real important that we keep that person alive in not only our hearts but in our minds.
I don't mind sharing what we're doing this year. We're taking flowers for the tombstones as a sort of little family event. We also will at our Christmas dinner, which is incidentally not on Christmas Day, we are playing last year's videotape of our last Christmas. And this is by agreement with the whole family. Anybody who does not want to be a part of that does not have to be.
Yeah, and I think it's real important. I think that's a wonderful idea. It's going to be a very sad time, but you know it going in, but there'll be a lot of happy memories from that.
Yeah, the memories are a really good way of dealing with our negative feelings because that's the happy part. That's the part we keep with us forever and ever. That's the part nobody can take away from us.
Right. I'd like to thank you both for joining us for 30 minutes. Our topic today has been grief during the holidays, and our guests have been June Moll and Peg Renone, and we've discussed ways to cope and that it's okay if you don't feel good during the holidays. I'm Tracy Sharp. Thanks for joining us. This program has been pre-recorded. Join us next week for WCMT's 30 Minutes.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio.
You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.